We are 5 weeks into the NFL season. I am Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 6 NFL predictions. Last week I went 7-7, and for how unpredictable this NFL season has been so far, I'll take that because it could have been better, but it also could have been worse at the same time. And you have to admire how competitive and how exciting and thrilling most of these games were last week. So many games last week going wire to wire, thrilling finishes. What does week 6 have in store for us? This week, the Chiefs, Vikings, Dolphins, and Rams all have their bye week this week. Without further ado, let's get into the week 6 NFL predictions. As always, we begin with Thursday night football. This week, we have the 49ers and the Seahawks. The 49ers upset by the Cardinals last week, and the Seahawks upset by the Giants last week. Both teams looking to respond. The Seahawks, after starting the year 3-0, they are now on a 2-game losing streak. And I do think this has the potential of being one of the best games that we have this season on Thursday night. But do I think it's going to top last week's between the Buccaneers and the Falcons? I don't think so at all. But this has the potential of being a wire-to-wire game. But I am going to pick the 49ers to bounce back and respond. And there have been seasons in the past where the 49ers, they do struggle a little bit in the beginning of the season, but as the season goes on and they become healthier, then they start to establish themselves as one of the contenders in the NFC. And I think that is the case once again this season. I do think as the season goes along and as the 49ers become healthier, they are going to establish themselves as an NFC contender. Once again, we have a game in London this week. Jaguars and Bears. The Jaguars with a win over the Colts last week, which I was saying was a must-win for them, as we have seen teams rally in the past that start out the year 1-4 or 1-5 and find their way in the playoffs. But if the Jaguars started off the season 0-5, I felt like it would have been nearly impossible for them to rally and make the playoffs. But now they go to London, where more often than not, they have success in London. They had 2 games in London last season. They won them both. And they take on a Bears team that has been getting better as the season has progressed. Caleb Williams gets better and better every week. He had his best game as an NFL quarterback yet against the Panthers last week. And currently, the Bears are favored by 1.5 points in this matchup in London. And I do feel like that is a trap for a lot of people. Because what I think they're doing is, I think that people are going to have the mentality of, well, the Bears, they are on a winning streak right now, and the Jaguars, they only have 1 win on the year so far, and it was a win against the Colts team that they had a backup quarterback in that game, and they will see how Caleb Williams has been in these last couple of weeks, and they'll side with the Bears. But the Jaguars, for some reason, they are a better team in London. There is a better chance of them having success in London. And I think the Jaguars, they pull off the upset. As I mentioned last week, the game against the Colts last week for the Jaguars, it was the potential of a turning point in their season. And I do think they make it 2 in a row. Commanders and Ravens, both teams on a winning streak. Commanders a 4-game winning streak. The Ravens a 3-game winning streak. For the Commanders, Jaden Daniels, is off to a terrific start in his NFL career. And he has the most rushing yards out of any quarterback in NFL history in their first 5 starts. And if he keeps on playing the way that he's playing, he could end up being the first rookie since Jim Brown. In fact, Jim Brown is the only rookie to ever win NFL MVP. And if the Commanders, if they keep playing the way they're playing, Jayden Daniels, he could easily win league MVP. At the very least, I think Jayden Daniels is the rookie of the year at this point in the NFL season. And they go on the road to take on a Ravens team that has started to hit their stride after starting off the season 0-2. Derrick Henry has done really well in the Ravens' last 2 games. And this is a matchup of the 2 teams that have run the football the best so far this season. They are the top 2 in rushing offense. But I'm going to pick the Ravens to win this game, as the Commanders, they have not gone up against an offensive line like the Ravens so far this season. There are occasions throughout the year where the Ravens, they do tend to play down to their competition. We saw that against the Raiders in week 2. But I do think the Ravens, they did learn from that mistake. And I do think they win this one this week. But I'm very intrigued to see if Jayden Daniels and the Commanders, if they can make this a game and keep this game close. Because this is the toughest team the Commanders have faced since the Buccaneers in week 1. I'm going with the Ravens, but if this is a high-scoring game, I would not be surprised. Cardinals and Packers. The Cardinals with an upset victory over the 49ers last week. And they go on the road to take on the Packers in Lambeau. The Packers, they narrowly escaped against the Rams last week. The Rams were moving late in that game, but the Packers defense stood tall on 4th down to seal the victory. And Jordan Love is starting to get back into a rhythm after missing a few games due to an MCL sprain. And he did throw a pick 6 in the game last week against the Rams. I felt like it would take at least 1 or 2 games for him to get back into rhythm fully. He did have at least 390 something passing yards. I can't remember the exact number at the top of my head right now, but part of that could be the Vikings defense was just playing a little more relaxed toward the end of that game. But that momentum, I do feel like, was used to go up against the Rams that very next week. And I think Jordan Love is fully back into rhythm now. And I think the Packers, they do win this game. The Cardinals, they have been notorious for pulling off upsets in the past couple of seasons. Last week was a good example of that. But I do think the Packers, they do win this game. I do think Josh Jacobs has a big performance in this game, as the Cardinals' run defense is towards the bottom of the league. Texans and Patriots. For as unpredictable as this NFL season has been, this game feels pretty self-explanatory. The Texans are currently sitting at 4-1 on the year. They've had back-to-back last-second victories over the Jaguars and Bills, while the Patriots, they sit at 1-4 on the season, where the Patriots defense has had to keep them in the game all season to give the Patriots a chance to win. And we learned today that the Patriots will be starting Drake May in this game, and he will make his NFL debut. And I do feel like this is a big mistake by the Patriots to start him in this game instead of last week, because if they would have started him last week, there would have been a much better chance the Patriots would have had of winning that game against the Dolphins, because right now the Dolphins and Patriots, they are in the exact same situation. At least to an extent, they're in the same situation. As both teams, they're looking at who is better serviceable as their quarterback right now. And if Drake May would have started against the Dolphins last week, and if the Patriots would have ended up winning that game, then you keep starting Drake May, and Drake May would have some confidence going into this game. But now he's going up against a Texans defense that has really been punishing to quarterbacks they faced all season long, with the exception of Sam Darnold. And I'm going with the Texans to win this game very convincingly, as I do feel like they are starting Drake May 1 week too late at this point in time. Buccaneers and Saints. The early odds for the games this week originally had the Saints as a 2.5-point favorite for this game. Going into Monday Night Football, the Saints were favored by 2.5 in this game against the Buccaneers. But Derek Carr was injured in the game, and he is likely to miss at least 2 weeks with an oblique injury. And now the Buccaneers are a 2.5-point favorite. So this game has completely shifted, which is expected. The Buccaneers, they also played on Thursday night last week, which for those of you that tune in regularly, you know that I do tend to favor the teams who played on Thursday night the week prior because they have that rest factor to an advantage. The Buccaneers, they also traveled to New Orleans earlier than a visiting team normally would due to Hurricane Milton being on its way to the Tampa area. And I was going to pick the Buccaneers to win this game anyway. And the reason for that, it may seem like a pretty bad way to look at it, at least from a sports and athletic aspect of it, but with Hurricane Milton making its way to the Tampa area, when a disaster happens to a sports city, teams, they always want to bring their A game every week after that happens more than ever, because they want to provide happiness to their city, a part of healing from a disaster. And I think the Buccaneers, they do win this game, and I would be picking them to win this game regardless if Derek Carr was starting in this game or not. Browns and Eagles. The Browns once again had an abysmal performance, this time against the Commanders. And despite abysmal performance after abysmal performance, Kevin Stefanski has ensured that Deshaun Watson is still their guy. He is the quarterback moving forward. There is no intentions of benching Deshaun Watson in favor of Jameis Winston, even though Jameis Winston makes more sense to start at quarterback right now, and close to 99.9% of people would agree. As the Browns, they just need a spark, as the Browns have been abysmal all year long. The only game they won was against the Jaguars, and the Browns, they only did enough to win that game. And they go on the road to take on an Eagles team that is fresh off a bye week. They had time to get healthier. The statuses of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they are still in question right now at this point, but I would lean towards them possibly playing in this game. And I think the Eagles, they do win this game convincingly. I mean, the best news the Browns can have right now is that Nick Chubb is close to returning to action, but it's not looking like it's going to be this week. I'll be surprised if it is. But even if Nick Chubb was in the game for the Browns, I still think the Eagles, they do win this game very convincingly, as it's hard to pick the Browns right now, given how abysmal they have looked all season long. Colts and Titans, and this game is a very tough game to predict because we don't know the exact quarterback matchup for this game. For the Colts, will Anthony Richardson return to the lineup this week, or will Joe Flacco once again be the starter for the Colts? And for the Titans, do they go with Will Levis as the starter, or do they go with Mason Rudolph? If I'm the Titans, I am starting Mason Rudolph because the Titans defense, they have done enough in all 4 of their games this season where they had the ability to win, but Will Levis has just turned the football over constantly. Will Levis has cost the Titans at least 2 victories, in my opinion, maybe even 3. If Will Levis played clean football, who knows? With how good the Titans defense has been throughout almost the entirety of this season, maybe the Titans are 4-0 right now. But at the very least, they could be 3-1. If Will Levis starts for the Titans, I know the Titans, they're off of a bye week, but if Will Levis starts for the Titans, I think the Colts win, regardless if it's Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco starting at quarterback. But if the Titans start Mason Rudolph, I am picking the Titans to win this game. So this pick right now, it is to be announced. And I'll mention my pick in the comment section once it's announced who starts at quarterback for the Titans in this game. Chargers and Broncos. The Chargers had their bye week last week, while the Broncos, a dominant win over the Raiders. The Broncos are right now on a 3-game winning streak after starting the season 0-2. There are question marks for the Chargers going into this game. Joe Alt is questionable. Rashawn Slater is questionable. Their top 2 offensive tacklers, questionable for this game. Joey Bosa is also questionable for this game. Junior Colson is questionable for this game. Derwin James is back after serving his 1-game suspension. So if Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, if they do play in this game, which I am leaning towards they do play in this game, I do think that for the Chargers to win this game, they have to run the football effectively against the Broncos defense. As we've seen this season so far and throughout half of last season, that if the Broncos defense is able to keep the Broncos in the game, then there's a strong chance the Broncos have of winning. Justin Herbert, he has been injured throughout the season, but I'm going to pick the Chargers to win a close game. I hope I don't regret it by going against the Broncos again this week. But I'm going to pick the Chargers. I do feel like they had the opportunity to get healthier, and I think it's going to work to their advantage. However, if Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater don't play in this game, I will definitely consider changing my pick to the Broncos. But it's unsure if they will both play in this game, and also we're unsure if Joey Bosa will play in this game. Steelers and Raiders, both teams on the losing end last week. The Steelers to the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, and the Raiders to the Broncos. And the Raiders, they continue to be an absolute dysfunctional franchise. Antonio Pierce was recently caught in 4K. As Davante Adams, he said in an interview that there is little to no communication within the organization, and Davante Adams, he requested a trade, and teams are interested in Davante Adams, but they don't want to give up too much for Davante Adams, as Davante Adams, for one, he is injured right now, and two, they don't want to give up too much to risk the attitude that Davante Adams has been expressing in recent years. And this one, it just feels like an easy one for me. I'm going with the Steelers, and if there was one wrong pick that I wish I could have back from last week, it would be thinking the Raiders would win against the Broncos. I genuinely feel bad for Max Crosby. I wish that he was with a franchise that wasn't so dysfunctional, but he is loyal to the Raiders, and he even has the Raiders logo tattooed on his body. I'm picking the Steelers to respond after the Sunday night heartbreaker last week, where the Steelers, they did everything they could for a goal line stand. They even forced a fumble, but ultimately the Cowboys were able to recover that fumble and score the game-winning touchdown on 4th and goal. Falcons and Panthers. The Falcons, a victory on Thursday Night Football last week against the Buccaneers in overtime, where Kirk Cousins threw for over 500 passing yards. And I do sense this is a trap game for the Falcons. I do think that is a strong possibility. The Falcons, they may have extra rest compared to the Panthers, which, for those of you that tune in regularly, you know that I do like to favor teams who played on Thursday the week prior. Despite that, this is the first road game for the Falcons in nearly a month. They've had their last 3 games at home. And they take on a Panthers team that they lost to on the road last year. Now, it was terrible weather conditions for that game, but a loss is a loss. And Andy Dalton is 4-0 in his career against the Falcons. The Falcons are favored by nearly a touchdown. 6.5 points is what the Falcons are favored by right now. I want to call for the upset and take the Panthers to win. I think at the very least, the Panthers are able to cover that 6.5 points. I do think the Falcons win. This feels like a game where the Falcons, where they get off to a slow start, but then they find a way at the very end to win. And that's why I think the Falcons, they do win this game, but don't be surprised if the Panthers pull off this upset, because it definitely could happen. Lions and Cowboys in America's game of the week. We saw this matchup last season, and it was the most controversial game of the NFL season. The Lions, they score a late touchdown, and instead of wanting to tie the game and play for overtime, they decide to go for 2. They get the 2-point conversion, but it's called back due to an ineligible man downfield, and the Cowboys win. And it was absolute controversy, as it was the difference between the Cowboys getting the 2nd seed and the 3rd seed in the NFC playoffs. But in typical ball doesn't lie fashion, the Cowboys, an abysmal loss to the Packers in the wild card round. And the Lions, they won in the wild card round against the Rams. And the Lions ultimately got to host the divisional round game anyway. And now we see these teams once again this season. And I have a feeling that this game is going to be controversial again. The Lions had their bye week last week, while the Cowboys, they had a come-from-behind victory against the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. The 2nd week in a row, the Cowboys have gotten the win, but they've only done just enough to win the game. The Cowboys, they have not looked impressive all season long, ever since week 1. And now that we know what the Browns are, that doesn't even look impressive anymore. I do think in this game, despite the Lions on paper, they should dominate this game. I am going to pick the Cowboys to win this game for the sole reason that I expect this game to end in controversy and the Cowboys will be on the winning end of it. Because if the Commanders, if they do lose to the Ravens early on in the day, then the Cowboys, if they win, they will be 4-2 with the Commanders. Or even if the Commanders do win against the Ravens earlier in the day, I do feel like the NFL just wants to keep the Cowboys in the NFC East. They don't want the Cowboys to lose all this ground in the NFC East. And I'm sure this will not matter and the Lions will win by 14 plus anyway, but that's just what I'm thinking with this. Sunday night football, Bengals and Giants. The Bengals were on the losing end of what was the game of the season so far against the Ravens last week. And now they go on the road to take on a Giants team that, despite being 2-3, they have looked a lot better than what most people, including myself, thought going into the season. The Giants' only real bad game this season was against the Vikings. And in that game, they were at least in that game for most of the first half. Other than that, the Giants, they've been in games from start to finish. And what immediately sticks out to me about this game, the spread for this game is currently set at Bengals minus 3.5. It's suspicious to me because as of late, more often than not, the Giants make games close when they are in primetime. We saw that a couple of weeks ago against the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. And this is a desperate 1-4 Bengals team. I do think there is a bit of a little lack of confidence in the Bengals right now off of the emotional loss against division rival Ravens. And I do think the Bengals, this is a game where they are going to struggle throughout most of the game, but they'll find a way to win it by exactly 3 points. That's what I have thought about with this game, why the spread is currently 3.5 points in the Bengals' favor, and with the Giants more often than not performing better in primetime as of late. I feel like the Bengals win, but it's only by 3 points. Week 6 concludes with Monday Night Football, Bills and Jets. Both teams looking to get back in the win column as they're both on 2-game losing streaks. Today we got some big news. The Jets parted ways with head coach Robert Saleh. And there is a lot of drama surrounding Robert Saleh being let go. All throughout the day, there have been lots of reports on everything that went down. First, it was reported he was let go. Then, it was reported when he was let go, he was escorted out of the building by team security. They did not allow him to meet with the team and address them that he was being let go. Then it's reported that Robert Saleh was considering parting ways with offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett and giving the offensive play calling duties to Todd Downing. And then he was let go minutes later. Then it's reported Aaron Rodgers was completely blindsided by the news. And it's clear and obvious none of the players were aware of the news, and they were all completely blindsided, as they did not allow Robert Saleh to meet with the team and address that he was being let go. The Jets are just absolutely dysfunctional right now. And I don't think the Jets are motivated at all in this game. I would not be surprised if this Monday night we saw the Jets play their worst game of the season. I really would not. And I know you have the win for the Gipper mentality. They want to finish this season strong for Robert Saleh. But this Jets team was just blindsided. And I doubt they have any motivation to go out there. Even though this is a divisional game, I'm picking the Bills because I find the Bills the more motivated team than the Jets. With the Jets just being blindsided, the way they were blindsided. Meanwhile, the Bills, last week at least, it's, they had what it took to win the game. And Sean McDermott, he did take accountability for the loss last week. And I'm going with the Bills to get back in the win column. And that will do it for my Week 6 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And please be on the lookout for any YouTube shorts I upload during the week. I tend to do a couple YouTube shorts every week. Enjoy the games this week. Until next time, have a good one. And remember, Vegas is always watching.